My name is Max. I am a multi-award-winning disability and LGBTQ+ advocate, and in my last video, my goals for... well, it was not called goals, but it was a goals video. I said I was going to talk about my disability in STEM outreach. There is going to be an overlap with LGBTQ+ advocacy and activism as well, because it's quite hard to separate the two when I do both, because I am disabled and queer. I have a whole channel dedicated to what my disabilities are. This is not that video. Once you're done here and you're interested in what my disabilities are, you can go back and check. So we all know I'm disabled and we all know I've won awards because of my advocacy, but like, what do I actually do? What is outreach? So outreach is a conscious effort to bring, in this case, science and STEM subjects to audiences that don't always have access to it. You can bring services, information and awareness beyond current and usual limits. So, for example, bringing STEM to classrooms which don't always have access to STEM or don't have access to disabled role models. So for me, the outreach that I'm doing is everything that involves bringing STEM subjects to disabled people, to queer people, sometimes marrying disability and queerness together, and then also talking about science. I am attempting to show the world that disabled scientists exist and that we're good. My goal is to reduce the amount of disabled scientists that have the same story as me. So I promise I'm going to try and keep it brief. It's not really a brief story. There will be timestamps if you're already aware of my story, or you're just not interested and you just want to know what I do. So I didn't always identify as disabled, and what this means to me is I was born not visibly and obviously disabled. I have a genetic connective tissue disorder which didn't manifest itself until my mid to late teens, but like retrospect and hindsight being 2020, there were definitely signs. For example, my party tricks, being able to bend and contort in certain ways that are way beyond normal. Some of my symptoms weren't even thought about at all, like visual snow syndrome. I've had that my whole life, but I didn't have a frame of reference, so I thought everybody saw like that. I didn't know. At around 14-ish, I developed cold urticaria and became allergic to cold. This was step one in my known chronic illness journey. Chronic pain, dislocations, fainting, more allergies, digestive issues, they all followed after. And one of the biggest problems was they were all sort of so-called invisible disabilities, so I wasn't disabled until I was. But lots of people couldn't see that. Getting a diagnosis of a so-called invisible disability at a young age is all but impossible. It's very, very difficult. Adults, especially in the medical profession, tend not to believe teens when they say they're in pain all the time. It gets chalked up to growing pains or hormones or, oh, you'll grow out of it. I was pushed hard academically with no support for the pain and what was going on in my body. I do identify as one of those former gifted kids that burnt out, because I was always in like top set at school. I did well grades wise, and then A-levels hit and my body was just... it was really hard to do both together when I only had academic support. I started using a walking stick about a year or so later. So my chronic pain hit just before my GCSEs, and at my first round of A-levels I was using my walking stick-ish. People were shocked, and there was discussion amongst teachers about whether I was even allowed to have a walking stick at school. Anyway, I did my best. I missed all of my predicted grades, which added to the problem, because if I didn't hit my predicted grades, it was counted as a fail. I was predicted like A stars across the board, so even if I got an A, that counted as a fail and I had to resit, so that doubled my academic workload. And my disabilities did not get that memo. They did not go like, oh, we'll hold off a little bit. They continued. Uni tried much harder to provide support physically, so I had what was called a statement of access. So if I was late, I wouldn't lose marks. If I missed a lab, I would have the opportunity to resit, but others wouldn't. I got extra time in exams because of the chronic pain in my hand from doing all the writing. But it was sort of limited. They got better and better as time went on. There were lots of conversations, but I played an active role in making things better. I brought problems to their attention, told them how they could fix it, and watched them implement it and helped. To everyone's credit, when I came in using a wheelchair with absolutely no warning, no one batted an eyelid, they were all cool with it. There were some obvious logistical issues, like trying to get into the classrooms. Some of them were not designed for wheelchair access, and some of them did end up getting re-timetabled and moved around so that I would be able to attend properly. The biggest hurdle at uni was actually my name change, because I changed my first name to be more in line with my gender and just how I feel, and my old name was not very good anyway. But weirdly, the person who can change first names and the person who can change second names, different people. Why? Why? So if you get married and you change your last name, much easier to change it than if you change your first name. Why? I became our Pride Society's first ever queer officer to deal with non-binary stuff, and then I became the university's first trans officer, 2 years running via election. So I used to work with university staff to fix all the problems and the lack of inclusion and just the way things were phrased on internal forms and on the external website. So yeah, I spent both of my degrees doing advocacy work and doing activism work on quite as well. I say small scale, it was university wide, so that was quite good. Historically, I wanted to fix as many problems as I could so that future students could just study if they wanted to. Then I graduated, and as we're all aware, I went straight into unemployment. It was October, I finished my masters, handed everything in October 2018, graduated December 2018, then January 2019 I was in the news for being allergic to cold, and I know, that's a normal amount of time to be unemployed after graduating, that's like fine. So I was talking about in all my interviews like, oh yeah, I've just graduated with a master's in pharmacology, I'm looking for work, woohoo! The job searching as a disabled person sucked. It's crap. So the employability teams at my university, back then, now they're much better, but back then they had never dealt with someone who was disabled in the ways that I was, who wanted to be actively in the lab. They didn't know how to help. A lot of job applications that I put in were rejected either immediately because I included wheelchair basketball coaching on my list of skills, which is good leadership skills and good team working ability, but they just saw wheelchair and panicked. I did a test where I handed in 2 different CVs, one with all the good stuff and one just, I graduated, yay! And they offered an interview to the really basic, I graduated, and the one with all the extra stuff, they were just like, nope, sorry. I tried to use a lot of my unemployment time to sort out my medical issues. I was pursuing formal diagnoses for things that I had just let slide. So for my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, for POTS, it was also discovered at this time that I had a hearing loss. I knew I was struggling, but when did I have the time? I could barely make it to uni. So we figured that out, and that I needed hearing aids. We figured that bit out, which I was like, oh, this might help in job interviews. So when I don't hear a question, they don't think I'm an idiot. So I was doing all of that, and then I signed on for universal credit because you need money to live. And if you don't have a job, you don't really have any money. So I signed on to universal credit, and they were worse. They did not understand the concept of disability science. Like, are you sure you're qualified? And then they kept sending me for jobs like in McDonald's, which is a fine job, but like at the time as a wheelchair using hearing aid user, I don't think that was really an appropriate job because of all the beeping, all the noise, it wasn't a suitable job opportunity for me. And they just kept making me apply for all these jobs. And like, yeah, I get it that, it's better to be employed in a job that's not science than not. But it was finding an accessible role while also doing all of the investigations. They also wouldn't even let me in to my appointments in a wheelchair. But they were just so inaccessible, and without a diagnosis they just pushed you to inaccessible roles because obviously without that piece of paper, it doesn't count. This is all really boring. Sorry, I sort of keep it brief. But yeah, eventually in March 2022, I finally, with the help of a friend, got into my first job. I left Nottingham, I stopped making YouTube videos for a bit, I moved to Cambridge, I spent nearly a year settling in, being like, as soon as I got into my first role, I knew that I couldn't just be like, oh, I made it now, I can stop. Because I'm not the only disabled person studying a STEM subject that will struggle to get into work. We're now on to the part of the video where I talk about what I actually do. In terms of disability in STEM outreach, it is a mixed bag. It's overlaps with LGBTQ in STEM and disability in LGBTQ, because disabled people can be gay, shocker. So to start with, I became an alumni fellow with my university as soon as I was able. You have to be like 3 years out from graduation, and I was 3.5 years of unemployment plus like a couple of months in work. I went back and I gave career talks about my role as a cell line engineer, which I can link up here somewhere. I started sharing my journey with students because a lot of students are told, oh, you'll just walk into a job, and that is not applicable for all students. And I think it's important that they don't always have that expectation, that sometimes it will be a while. It can be quite a while. So I shared that with them, and then how I finally got into work, what I actually do at work, and then talked about how disability affects my job and how to be a good ally for disabled people. I also sit on their Biosciences Employer Board, so that we can help shape the biosciences courses to what industry is actually looking for. Also in 2022, I started working with national charities for the first time. So I worked with Sense, and I wrote a blog post about my life as a deafblind drag king, and I talked about all the ways my sensory loss impacts my drag performance, and how venues can be more accessible and how we can welcome more disabled drag performers into the arts. For this work, I was awarded Person of the Year 2022 by Sense, which is over there. It's a glass trophy, you can't really see it, but there's a star right there. And in 2023, we added a video counterpart to that blog post. I will put a link to that down in the description below. There will be lots of links for you to look at if you're interested in the outreach that I do. With my company, I went to Cambridge Rare Disease Network's RareFest. So RareFest is a festival that happens in Cambridge biannually, where it is a marriage of rare disease patients and patient groups and the industry that is trying to improve treatments and cures and research for rare diseases. So as a cell line engineer, we provided research tools. So we took live cells, we got to show cells and how to grow cells in flasks to kids, to patients, to adults, to everyone around. This was just the start of my journey with CamRare. 2022 was sort of a quiet year in terms of me figuring out my role as a scientist, but also doing outreach. I continued doing alumni fellow stuff, so I stayed on the board, I kept doing career talks, I came into lectures, I gave guest lectures, I did all sorts of stuff as an alumni fellow. I also did internal talks at work. I gave a talk about gender, a STEM perspective, where I talked about all the different studies on gender and the binary experience versus the non-binary experience. The Gina Rippon study, which I've talked about many times, I talked about that as well. And then I also talked about my experiences as a queer person in STEM and out in the world in Cambridge. I worked with Sense again to create a Deafblind Awareness Week video and a campaign about that. We dispelled all kinds of myths about deafblind people. It was very fun. I set up and launched a global disability employee resource group within my company. We had a launch where I talked about my experiences, and then we had other meetings where people would come forward and say, this is a problem we've been having, can you fix it? And the answer was yes. We did one-to-one career support, all kinds of cool things. I spoke at CamRare's Rare Summit, which is like the counterpart to RareFest. It happens also biannually in the years that RareFest doesn't happen. I was on a Rare Youth panel where I was the example of having come out the other side. I was featured in a poster series aimed at classroom level to provide disabled role models for future scientists. I was on a Disability History Month panel at King's College London, and I did all sorts of other stuff. I went and visited other labs to talk about accessibility and how they can access patient groups. In 2024, things ramped up again. So I left my old job, I started a new one, I was in my new role as a senior research associate, and I continued my outreach efforts still. I continued my alumni fellowship work, and I kept my seat on the Biosciences Employer Board. I ran the Cambridge Half Marathon and raised over £500 for Cambridge Rare Disease Network. Would not do again. Did not have a good time. I was on a podcast to talk about my experiences as a disabled person in STEM. The podcast is called AXS Chat. I highly recommend. There's a link down there to my episode, but they talk to all sorts of disabled people, not sponsored. It's just a great podcast. I became a registered scientist with the Science Council and the Royal Society of Biology because for all the outreach work I do, there's always going to be someone that goes like, oh, you're only here because you're disabled, you're not actually good at science. So I maintain my registration, which involves continued professional development. There's like an annual renewal, and basically it just makes sure that you complete your work to a high standard and you are, air quotes, good at science. Also makes me Max Fisher RSCI, which is very cool. I was a soapbox science speaker in London where I got to stand on a literal soapbox and talk to the general public about being a disabled scientist and growing cells in flasks, because I do actually really love my job. I spoke at Pagan Tribal Gathering again for the 3rd year, and I held space for disabled pagans, and we basically just had a discussion about how the pagan community can do better to accommodate disabled pagans. I was awarded Outstanding Alumni by my university. I will put a link up there to come win an award with me, where my ego gets inflated. I got to give a speech to the future scientists of tomorrow, well today now, and it was great just to sort of give a speech about sort of my journey, but also just hopefully to inspire people to be more open-minded and to help each other out. I went to Germany to do drag at a deaf festival. We've talked about this. I'll put another card up the top. Then the week after that, I performed at Bedford's first ever Pride Festival, which was great, and I took my friend Christian Gay with me. It was awesome. I went to Rochdale to teach a group of deaf people about science, which was really cool. I got to use English, British Sign Language and Arabic, which I am learning very slowly. It's very difficult. And then I was highlighted as the UK's most influential disabled scientist in the Disability Power 100, and I was number 6 on the Disability Power 100 overall, which is very, very cool. The award for that is that blue one over there, and that certificate next to it. And then literally 3 days later, I gave a talk at RareFest 2024 about would I cure my own rare diseases, and can science be kinder to disabled people? I basically made the audience vote on which of my rare diseases would I cure, and they mostly got it wrong. It was great. It was sort of to highlight the priorities of scientists, and like, oh, scientists think we should research this because it sounds awful, and then you speak to disabled people and sometimes the opinion differs. I also volunteered at RareFest, just making sure that it ran smoothly, and I was a photographer for the day, which was fun. The point being, there are so many ways you can do disability in STEM outreach, or just STEM outreach, or just LGBTQ+ STEM outreach. There is no right or wrong way to do it, because as long as you are being authentic and you are sharing your experiences and you are teaching factually the best that you can, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. There is no one magic way to be good at outreach. And outreach is really important, because I would have loved, growing up and doing the struggles that I did, to have seen someone else in my position on the other side. I know now there is a push for, we've got EDI happening, all of our stock photos, they're becoming a little bit more diverse, but even big companies, not gonna name names, but they are starting to put out disability in STEM stock photos and guides on how to be accessible, but their stock photos are inauthentic. They have people who are clearly not wheelchair users in wheelchairs that are clearly just bought from the shop around the corner or borrowed. They are not, which some disabled people do use wheelchairs like that, like I do. I don't have a custom fit wheelchair, and it's been in the garage for like 3 years because my body has changed and currently I don't need it. But it's just so painfully obvious that the lab that they're using is also not accessible, because I saw one and they were like, yeah, wheelchair user in STEM, and the bench was like up here and they were trying to pipette, like, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And I was like, dude, you tried? So that is one of my goals, is to fix that. That's a big goal. Outreach is important to shape both current and future generations, because the current generation was the one that stopped me getting into work for 3.5 years, because there wasn't the awareness or the acceptance of disability in STEM that there is now. Now that we are louder, minds are more open, and that helps, but I think it's still important to continue raising this awareness, because just because I got in, that doesn't mean I can stop. There are other people we can help, and I don't have to do outreach and awareness on stuff that just affects me. And then the future generations get to see us thriving and succeeding and being there and having it not be some big thing, which is sort of counterproductive, because I do make it a big thing, but the point is I have to make it a big thing for it to then not be a big thing. I do dream of a day where I don't have to do disability and STEM outreach. I can just be disabled and talk about science and it not be like a whole thing, because we're already there. Now that we're all up to speed in this probably too long video, I'm hoping that I can now bring you guys along with a bit more context. So I've got some conferences coming up that I'm hoping that I'll be able to vlog and talk about on here a bit more. And when I post things like come win an award with me, it's not just like a random and out of the blue. You'll be included. It won't be every video, obviously, like my self-singularity bingo, that's still going to be a thing, but obviously not every video. The content on this channel generally not going to change, there'll just be some more of this. It's sort of a bit limiting because now I do one video a month instead of one a week, but that was almost like a full-time job, and I have one of those, so you get monthly, so it feels less varied, but I promise I'm trying. Or I'm at least giving myself the option to talk about STEM outreach and disability in STEM and queer in STEM and just some of the other cool stuff that I'm doing if I decide that I want to. And give you guys ideas for if you want to do any outreach projects in whatever subject you study, whatever you do for work, there is outreach to be done. So thank you for listening. I hope that has been interesting, enlightening. I promise it wasn't just a humble brag of all the cool stuff that I get to do, but it might sound like that. But that's what I did, what I do. I don't want my two worlds to be so separate anymore. So don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, drop a comment if you have any questions, or if you want to work with me on an outreach project, you can do that as well. You can also do that on my website, which I'm going to start putting in my description as like a default thing. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. Videos go up once a month. I aim for somewhere in the middle, but I'm a busy little guy, so sometimes it happens at the last minute. See ya!